And welcome back to Dear Jane. I'm Scott Baker, and Marcy Little is alongside. How are you today, Marcy?
Doing great. Excited about this conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Today's Dear Jane brought to us by our friends at Cogency Strategic. Lots of constitutional battles coming up this year. Looking at about 12 states, probably. They're going to be fighting to keep unlimited abortion out of their state constitutions. Cogency Strategic can help you with your messaging, not only what to say, but how to say it with very, very strategic and very, very hyper targeted messaging and delivery. You need to check them out. You need to go to cogencystrategic.com. You can have a free, no obligation consultation. Just sort of check out the capabilities that are there. I think you might be impressed with just how specific and how targeted they can be when it comes to messaging. Marcy, have you ever sat down with someone from the other side of the abortion debate? Like, I'm talking someone like militant, right?
hmm
And just sat down and had a calm conversation with them?
I've attempted it. Yeah.
But
On
have you ever been successful?
yeah, I think I was successful at provoking thought, helping them, this individual I'm thinking of just was, sharing some sound bites they had picked up along the way. And so kind of poked at that a little bit, asked some questions. I think it left them thinking about
Yeah.
what they were advocating for. Yeah.
So a couple weeks ago, I had the honor of hearing a presentation from our guest today. Uh, and, what was cool is John gave a presentation in the afternoon after lunch, and I didn't get sleepy, and no one in the room got sleepy. So
That's
that
nap.
right there, yeah, it was generally nap time, so everybody was engaged. So that right there, that's just good material right there. So we're thrilled to death to have John Bockman on. John, of course, is a military physician assistant. He's co-author of Reconsidering Fetal Pain. We're going to talk about fetal pain today. We're going to talk about the research that has been done there. But John, first, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks
I
for
want
having
to
me.
talk about. I was so impressed when you were giving the presentation the other day, and you kept all of us awake in the afternoon, which was very good. The level you were talking about how you generally reach out to the other side. I mean, you clearly. I don't know if you have a passion for it, but the level of consideration that you put and when you reach out to the other side was just impressive to me. Talk a little bit about your approach, why you do it, and how you do it.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Scott. And that's a high compliment for me, because I don't put the same level of consideration into everybody. Uh, I try to sift through likely candidates, and I think I do this subconsciously as well as consciously. I'll see how they respond. First of all, I have an idea who I might want to talk to based on what I see them talk, how I see them interacting. I'll kind of look and see, and then I'll talk to people who I think might be good conversations. I really love talking to people from the other side, and so if they seem amenable to it, and if they seem like an interesting, promising conversation, I tend to focus most of my effort on those. I I I think everybody wants to be seen and heard and acknowledged, and so I try to give some acknowledgement to everybody, even if they're just being really, how shall I say, disagreeable. But for the ones who seem more open to a conversation, I will invest the time in them, whatever time they want. If I have it to give, I will give it to them.
Marcy, you got to understand, as John was talking, I mean, the level of detail. I mean, he considers what the other person likes, the food they like, the setting that they're going to have a conversation. I mean, it's really impressive. Just the amount of the thought that he puts into it. Have you done a lot of that, John? I mean, is that something that you do frequently or what?
Well, it's a little, it's my mode of operating. I think, some people have gifts for math, or they see big picture stuff, or um, they're good mechanically. I tend, as a older middle, younger middle of four boys, I tend to be sort of in the middle of everything anyway. And there was a lot of strife in my household, so I was trying to keep things together as a kid. And I think that, along with probably some natural personality traits, this is the way I look at life. I'm more of a natural born mediator, I think. And so I really believe in bringing sides together. And I can't tell you why. I think it's important. I think that in abortion and in many other areas, politics in general, I think that we're not going to get anywhere unless we can talk one side with another, instead of just repeating talking points. But I don't really know. You know, I just do it automatically. I don't usually go into that kind of detail, though, Scott. Not usually.
When you reach out to people, like what's your in? Like, are you just reaching out like, hey, I want to get to know you. I want to get to know your perspective. Is it ever perceived as like proselytizing? Like, what kind of responses do you get from people?
So my in, Marcy, yeah. So how to start this whole ball rolling? First of all, I find it most useful if I'm actually interested in what the other person has to say. Like, why are you the way that you are? I presume even the most militant, disagreeable, anti-me person has reasons for that. And they don't know, like most of them don't know me. They think they do, of course, because I'm just one big solid mass of evil to a lot of times. They don't know me. They'll make all kinds of accusations. So for them, my main thing is to get inside their emotions first. Like, I try not to be triggerable. Okay, that's not always easy. I do get angry. Um, but usually I only get angry with the people I actually care about, who I've invested some time with. Uh, if the people who are just throwing emotions at me without regard to, I can't get to them, I move on to somebody else. So if I have success, it's oftentimes knowing who not to talk to, and just sort of on the fly assessment, like this person is open, this person this person can be talked down from up here, emotional, like high intensity emotions, to something more conversational, because you can't really have a conversation at a really high emotional level. So it has to be kind of relaxed. That's my in. So I just engage them. Uh, Emotion, how I have a whole list of things, Scott, in my presentation. At the very end, I gave a whole lot of techniques, like pages and pages, like too
Mhm.
small to see on the screen, and too many techniques. Some examples at the end. I don't know if you saw the
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
They're just too many to count. But I think if I were to big picture it, the main thing is I actually have to care about the person first of all, and sometimes that means just ignoring them. If that's the best thing for them. Sometimes it means engaging them. And then I have to find the good. I have to find the good. If there is any good there, I have to draw it out. And then I have to magnify that. And people, as I said earlier, tend to want to be seen and heard and acknowledged. Their pain usually is what's speaking in these cases. And so I have to acknowledge that somehow. And eventually I want to mix in the truth. But mixing in the truth is not going to do anything. I don't have any authority with them until I actually acknowledge them and validate their emotions, even if I disagree with where they're taking them. Like, they need to know that I hear them, or they will not want to hear me. Only then can I. Sometimes getting at the truth is getting at their emotions, so it's not quite so linear. But by and large, it's like I have to have the right attitude towards them, and then I have to hear them, and then I have to mix in the truth to make it stick.
I'm interested in the whole caring about them part. I mean, because in some of the examples that I've heard you talk about, when you say caring about someone, I immediately think, well, someone you know well, like a relative or a close friend or something like that. I mean, you have built relationships with strangers. And
Yes.
so when you mean caring, you don't mean necessarily someone who's already close to you.
Right.
You mean building the relationship to the point where you care about them and go from there, I guess.
Yeah, yes, that's absolutely true. But there also has to be some nugget of that to begin the conversation. I have to I have to care about them in general, not knowing about the particulars in order to even reach out to them. So I have to adopt this attitude. That's what I'm talking about, this attitude, honestly, of if you want to be really not to be gushy about it, but love. And I don't think love is necessarily gushy. I think love is very, very brave and daring because that's the only thing that can make me want to reach out and bridge the divide with somebody who, by all appearances, hates me without even knowing me. What possible end could I have? So I have to adopt the attitude of caring about them as a person, as a big picture, even if nothing ever proceeds with this person. I have to care enough about them not to hate them, first of all, and then also, at least in general, in principle, to love them and to want to know more about them.
I don't know why my mic keeps freezing up. It strikes me that you have to have a certain level of curiosity about other people. And as I think about just your average anybody in the pro-life movement specifically, I think there's a hesitancy, or I think sometimes on the pro-life side, we think we make so many assumptions about people on the other side, whether it's about why they have abortions or why they promote abortion. And so I think those assumptions kind of limit our ability to be curious. And then I think as a follow-up to that, limit our ability probably to care, because then we just approach things with an agenda. How would you encourage someone who maybe is, and I get it, because they're on this, like, they want to save lives, they hate seeing lives lost to abortion. How do you even encourage someone to get to that starting point of approaching other people with curiosity when they think they already have them all figured out?
Yeah, I mean that's what we hate about the other side doing to us, right, Marcy? We hate it when other people see us as this big block of like a blob of cells, essentially. We hate it when they see us as this non-entity or this monolithic entity. We're not seen as individuals, which is it's dehumanizing, right? Which to me is the, if not the main basis, one of the bases of abortion and atrocity in general. And I assume we're on the same page here about abortion. I don't know, but I assume we're all on the same page. Like we view this as one of the primary atrocities, one of the great evils of all time. So I think underneath that is dehumanization. We have to dehumanize the fetus in order to continue along this path. So, well, if they also have to dehumanize us in order, to fight us, because it just goes hand in hand. Because if they were to admit that we have a case, it would be very hard for them to continue. Well, we dehumanize them the same way. They're evil. They are baby murderers. They don't care about anybody but themselves. Keep your damn legs closed. Can I say that? I'm sorry. Keep your legs closed. I mean, I'm pantomiming, I'm mimicking what I've seen and heard online from our side. And I get more frustrated with our side and their misbehavior than with their side. I expect them to misbehave. I still have standards. I will still cut off the conversation, and I frequently do. Sometimes it's just too, yeah, it's just too unproductive, shall we say. But I have blocked many pro-lifers who I see taken. I'll warn them, hey. So we have to have firm limits on our approaches. We have to have things we will not do, lines we will not cross. And I think I say this a lot, and I've certainly found it to be true in my own life. How can we become more interested, curious about the other person so that we can reach out in a caring way? I think we have to deal with our own stuff. I think we have to be radically honest with ourselves, because otherwise we risk projecting our own self-loathing for our own sins, shall we say, onto them, which is, in my perspective, what they do to us, what they do to the fetus. So we have to break that link with us by taking care of our own stuff, being radically honest with ourselves, develop good friendships, accountable friendships, have some greater purpose in our lives so that they don't threaten us if they they're not really threatening to us if they criticize us like that. So that's going to keep us non-reactive to them. It's going to keep us in a position of wholeness and love towards them. And it's going to keep us genuinely curious and open to these opportunities as they arise, instead of making them this undifferentiated blob of cells like they want to do to us or the fetus.
Oh, Scott's muted, so I'm going to jump in. Do you think the internet has made this worse? Because I think about my grandparents and their generation, and they were not all politically aligned or on the same page, but they had these deep friendships and were able to debate ideas, really important ideas, without breaking friendship. Is it just the internet that's done that? Are there other things? Like, how can we, obviously, we live in the age of the internet. That's not going anywhere. So how do we combat that huge barrier to these types of relationships that you're talking about?
Yeah, it is tough because people can debate anonymously, and you heard me mention accountability for ourselves and accountable relationships. And I think that is a hedge against this kind of what I see is a massive rise in narcissism in the internet age, and ever more so with the increase in social media. It is epidemic. It is driving a huge epidemic of anxiety, and I think a lot of our interactions that we can't explain with other people, like why are they this way? I think people are so anxious that everything is life or death, and and then you throw in resentment in there, and resentment is number one killer of all sorts of relationships. Yeah, I see resentment as a portal of evil directly into one's heart and soul. That's how I see it. And so you add all these things together, and people are less religious now than they ever used to be. They have no extrinsic idea of like having to forgive or needing forgiveness. And so all these things are kind of coalescing together. And I think, to be honest, in addition to social media and the rise of narcissism, I think feeling that also, mostly from a male side, but increasingly from a female side, is the rise of pornography, which makes us wildly selfish. It is addictive. It's not in the DSM-5, but it is wildly addictive. And I think that narcissism and selfishness is the enemy of all good relationship, period. So do I think the internet is feeling this? Yes, I think it is. It is pouring gasoline on this fire that's always been around. I think we all acknowledge that this did exist in our younger years, pre-internet. But I think the internet, social media, free, widely accessible porn is really dulling us to relationship. And I think relationships provide a natural sort of like softening and smoothing. We're not doing that anymore. It's all about ourselves.
For those who are watching the videos, we've got a really bad Zoom call going on right now. You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you. Yeah. So ultimately, is the goal to change their heart and mind, or is it for you to understand?
Ooh, yes.
What's your primary goal?
Yeah. So I deliberately answered it in an ambiguous way. Change their heart and mind, or understand. And I think you can do both at the same time. And I always am looking for an opening to change hearts and minds. On the other hand, I realize it's not possible in every case. And we talk about goals, and if we're too goal centered in relationships, it can make us view the other person as an object, as a machine. If I press this button, I'm going to get this result. And that is not relationship. And so it's a paradox, right? I want to change their heart and mind. I also want to understand their case, because what if their heart and mind is never changed? I have to still invest in understanding why they are the way they are, because chances are they're not alone in their perspective. They may have their particular flavor, inevitably they do, but I need to know what's driving them if I'm ever going to make progress and if I'm ever going to coalesce a team together. I need to know what's driving them. And the great irony of that is, of course, that makes me more likely to change their heart and mind.
So in the end, one of the big challenges people face is they're afraid of getting into a shouting match, right?
Mm.
How do you avoid that, or how do you de-escalate if it starts to go that direction? What tips do you have?
Yeah, I think that's such a key point is what is the exit strategy, Scott, when we get into these things? How do we know when we're done? And you know, you heard me mention narcissism. A lot of times, and I say narcissism and narcissist without any judgment whatsoever. Honestly, I think that kids who are raised devoid of parents, lack the attention as children, inevitably grow up to be narcissistic adults. And it's not even their fault in some sense. So it just is what it is. It's a product of modern society. And, you know, you heard me talk about the rise of social media, and this just fuels that. So narcissism, I've had to come to learn about narcissists a lot, and I see it a lot online. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. That's not, but I've had to learn kind of just as a practical endeavor. But a lot of times, you know, narcissists will want to be right all the time. They'll want to make you look bad all the time. So this is so common online. So I have to be real. I have to understand, like, I don't always know. And so I'll have to respond calmly or friendly or in kind of a joking or sometimes a backhanded compliment or just some acknowledgement and just see how they respond. And if it's clear they're giving me an opening to give facts, I'll give facts. If it's clear they're not giving, they just want to spout off, I'll just, you know, I'll be like, hey, I hear you, or I'll do something. You know, I like a little clever turn of phrase. And it tends to show that I'm just, like, for example, a couple nights ago, some guy was, you know, tweeting nonsense at me, and like there was no response. There was literally he wasn't asking for facts. He wasn't asking me to explain myself. He was just like angrily saying stuff, but I still wanted to acknowledge him. And so he was like, so what? I think it was his question about fetal pain. And I just replied with a Budweiser commercial, the dude Budweiser commercial from years ago, which you're in St. Louis, right? So Budweiser, Scott. So Budweiser, there was a commercial long ago that said, dude. It was all these different dudes. Like, it was nonsense, right? But listen, it just shows like, hey, okay, dude, you know, just give him something. It's a little humorous. And he was like, well, that's why nobody takes you seriously. And his screen name was, I'm Real Jesus Lick Me. I think something like that.
Oh,
that was his screen name. And so I was like, did you just say "what's up"? I'm Real Jesus Lick Me, and I put the "what's up" Budweiser commercial up there, and he was like, it just was like nonsense, okay? But he knows that I saw him. Did that conversation go anywhere? No, but it could have gone really negatively, and so I don't need to win some grand point, I think is what I'm getting at. I don't need to win a battle. That's not where I am for the most part. And I'll just interact in a just sort of friendly way like that. Like Wonder Woman with her little bands of like bullet ricocheting bands on her wrists, you know? Ting, ting, ting. Like, hey bro, that doesn't hurt me. You know, and why? Because they don't know me. So to get in, okay, so that's one method. The other method is sometimes I'll just say, and here's a key technique that I've used over and over and over again. I can tell, like, I care about this deeply. The other person cares about it deeply. If I can tell it's not going anywhere, here's what I tell them, Scott. I say, hey, I can tell we both care a lot about this, and we seem to be at an impasse. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Or please have the last word and enjoy the rest of your evening, or something like that. And it shows them, like, I am still taking the initiative. And if you want to talk about the frame game, like I'm still in charge of the conversation. I'm giving, and I'm giving. I'm not expecting anything in return. Okay. So that's benevolent. I'm giving them the last word. And it kind of sucks the air out of the that negative framework that a lot of them want to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And it soothes them. And I leave it, Scott. I leave it. So I don't just say it, I actually leave it there. That is a great exit strategy. If stuff starts to get too heated, most of the time I do something like that.
I love
That's
that.
good.
I think that's so practical. And if I can transition us a little bit, we can come back to this. But you said something earlier that piqued my curiosity about something you were talking about, how both sides can tend to dehumanize the other. And then when it comes to abortion, the way people support that is obviously by dehumanizing the baby. You've done a lot of work on fetal pain, and I'm curious because obviously like that's impactful to us. We already recognize that the unborn is human, and then to add insult to injury that they experience pain at some point during the pregnancy. Do you find that that helps humanize the unborn for the other side, or because they've already dehumanized, do they write that off? What's been the reaction to your work in that area?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's ironic that okay, Stuart Derbyshire, the lead author of the paper that we wrote, Reconsidering Fetal Pain in 2020, he is ardently pro-abortion, like up to birth, bodily autonomy of the mother, and that's it. That's it, point blank. Nothing else really matters. But except he's like, okay, but we could consider fetal pain, you know, as a part of that. But it should not infringe on her right to bodily autonomy as he sees it, which means abortion up at any time. Where we agreed is that like fetal pain, whether it exists or not, does not impinge on abortion per se, the way it's framed. If it's a bodily autonomy issue, then anytime during pregnancy, it shouldn't matter. Like it's wrong for me because it kills a human being. It's wrong, fetal pain, not because the fetus feels pain. And abortion is right to him because of bodily autonomy, irrespective of fetal pain. So that's how we came together. Pro-lifers oftentimes will push back saying fetal pain doesn't matter. Pro-choicers will come back and say fetal pain doesn't matter. I'm like, hey, we're on the same page here. It doesn't ultimately matter, except for me, given abortion, and abortion still exists, and late abortion still exists, I want the fetus to have adequate access to anesthesia. And to your question, does that humanize the fetus? The answer has to be yes. Because if it didn't, and let me just tell you this, I don't think the case for abortion rests on bodily autonomy, despite every protest to that effect. I think it rests on dehumanization squarely. So when we show the fetus has a heartbeat, the embryo has a heartbeat. When we show the fetus feels pain, the fetus has fingers and toes, toenails, eyebrows, eyelashes, can hear. You know, these things actually attack abortion in its lair. I think that it is not bodily autonomy ultimately, or they wouldn't fight every indication of fetal humanity. So fetal pain is something, you know, Jordan Peterson said in his 12 Rules for Life, he said that pain is real, pain matters more than matter matters. He said pain is the ultimate reality that none of us can deny. Pain we all experience and we fear it. And so that is an instant humanizing connection between us and other adults, between us and children, and in this case, us and fetal children as well.
So modern medicine, though, does not accept what you're saying. Is that correct? I mean, what does modern medicine say as far as what's the time that you say compared to what uh, some of the popular doctor groups and that what do they say?
Yeah, it's a they don't speak with one voice, except they say that
Right.
it's not early. And it's interesting because you would think that they would speak with one voice. I mean, there's this grand consensus up there. No, no. And in fact, over the years, the medical groups, mostly what I'm talking about are the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in the UK, and lately Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, the SMFM. So it's ACOG, RCOG, and to some degree SMFM, but really SMFM sort of supports ACOG. So you're right, they don't agree with it. Not the early. What they say is the cerebral cortex, the outer layer, typically of the brain, is there's some internal components as well, depending on who you talk to, but the cerebral cortex has to be present and wired up, so to speak. And they say that doesn't happen until 24 weeks, 26 weeks, 28 weeks, and it varies. There was a 2005 ACOG said it was third trimester, and specifically they were talking third trimester, 29 to 30 weeks, which is what the seminal paper that they always cited said. So 29 to 30 weeks based on the limited data available. So that sounds insane to us today, right? Because
Yeah.
we routinely have we
Yeah.
have premature babies born
hmm
24 weeks, 23, 22, and the NICU nurses treat that pain every time. So they say that the cerebral cortex has to be online, but yet we're treating babies much younger than these gestational ages. So it's what author Bridget Thill has called the fetal pain paradox. She wrote a paper about that in 2022, excellent paper, the fetal pain paradox. That we treat children in the NICU at much younger gestational ages than we acknowledge pain in the fetus.
Well, we know those other groups are also politically motivated, so
Well,
we won't
yes,
get
we
into get
Yes, we
into
do.
that.
And I hate that as a dismissal. I hate it as a dismissal, but it is absolutely true. Why? Because here, okay, so Scott, here's a conversation I had online not too long ago. There, RCOG is saying we don't need to revisit the issue of fetal pain because we've already done so 3 times in the last 30 years, and it's come up late every time. And other people are saying, well, the science of fetal development, embryology doesn't change. The development trajectory is the same, is the same, is the same. There's no use to go rehash this. We're not going to learn anything new. And yet, if you look at the dates that they're saying fetal pain arises, they're like this. They're like over the years, they're like this. Early, late, early, late, early, late. They're all 24 weeks or later, which happened to be viability at the time, which is really
Mhm.
interesting. So they're all over the place. Um, so yeah, so it's not so if the development doesn't change, but the dates of fetal pain change, what's causing that? And I would say politics.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to see more of John's work, John writes for Secular Pro Life. Our friends over there, Monica Snyder, he's got some stuff there. Lozier Institute, he's got all kinds of stuff. And then your Twitter handle. What's your Twitter handle? I was, I guess X now. I was reading some of your stuff now. You've got some great conversations going on there. What is your handle on there?
It's real Bachman. Don't tell my brother who's also on there, Dan Bachman. He apparently is not real Bachman,
And
and he
it's
spelled it
B O C K
Bockmann.
M A N N.
Two N's, yeah, and it's
Two
real, like
N's.
real thing, REAL. And I didn't know what to. I was new to Twitter, and I was like,
Yeah.
what do I put my handle as? And so I was like, people say real. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be famous someday, so I'm just gonna get this. I'm gonna get this handle squared away.
What do you think, Marcy? Harry Connick Jr. a little bit? He
Yeah,
looks
I
like
can do that.
he looks like.
Yeah.
Has anybody ever told you look like Harry Connick Jr.?
No, you're the first. And it's interesting to me because I just look like myself to me, right? People often, like, probably the number one most cited celebrity lookalike for me, doppelganger, is Tom Cruise. And I don't see that at all.
Hmm.
Maybe it's a smile. I think maybe sometimes when I smile like him, but I don't really know.
Well, good for you. Mine is Shrek, so it doesn't work out very well. Hey, John Bockman, thank you very much for joining us here on Dear Jane. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Scott, Marcy.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Dear Jane. Don't forget to subscribe. Of course, you can find us on all your podcast platforms of choice. Don't forget to follow us on X and Instagram. On behalf of Marcy Little, I'm Scott Baker. Thanks for listening.